I have a series on this channel called Tinder is not that difficult or Tinder is not that hard. I already forget what the name of the series is, and it's not the most popular series on the channel by any means. But, you know, I've been enjoying making it, and I recently released a related video, which was a sort of podcast between me and my best friend Vibe. And we discussed all kinds of things, both related to Tinder and not, but while we were talking about Tinder, we used the term incel. Which prompted a comment from a longtime subscriber, someone who I believe was there from pretty much day one, and I apologize for what I'm about to do to your name pronunciation right now. Iggy Menozan? 5641, and you can see their comment right here, and it was a very valid comment towards, you know, the use of the word, I think. And then Vibe responded with this, which was also, I think, a very valid response, you know, in the context of a comment section. And I had to make a decision of how, you know, how I would respond to it, if I was going to just leave a comment or bring it up next time Vibe and I had a video together. And I realized that if I wanted to ramble out everything I want to ramble on about, then I might as well make a video on its own. I will start off by saying two potentially contradictory things, which are, I will say that I will continue using this term, despite how much I hate what it's intended to mean. I have always, disliked the term at face value because for a start, it's an oxymoron, you know, it stands for involuntarily celibate, which doesn't add up because celibacy by itself sort of implies that it's voluntary, so it's voluntary abstaining from sexual and romantic relationships. And it even gets weirder when you introduce the newer terms that are added, like volcel. Volcel is such a stupid term. You mean just celibate, because volcel stands for voluntary celibacy. So it's a voluntary abstaining from sexual relationships. What the hell? Femcel kind of makes sense, because that's female, if you use it as female celibate, but of course it's supposed to be female incel, which is, once again, really stupid term. But I'm not really here to talk about something that pedantic as the main point. I just wanted to bring it up as a first point because it's something that comes into mind whenever I really think about the term. The reason I use this term, the reason I use it as, you know, in a derogatory fashion in the way that I do, and the way that I do in that video, I do not like what the term stands for, and I do not believe that it stands for, you know, what it should stand for at face value, which is someone who isn't in a sexual or romantic relationship and is struggling in those relationships through some obstacle which they have no control over. I believe, and I think a good portion of people will agree here, that a vast majority, a sad majority of the people who identify with this term aren't in such a hopeless situation that the term implies, and then that is then reinforced by them accepting this term and accepting the related community and following, you know, advice and the energy from that community and just making their lives perpetually worse. At its core, if I have to make a very, very short point, which I will not because there's probably some, you know, a whole lot of this video left, it's that I feel the need that I should keep using this term the way I do, which is to describe this community and associate this community with the toxicity that it is associated with, really, because I think it is worthwhile to discourage as much as possible people from interacting within that community. I will start also by saying that some years ago, I was probably quite close to going down a certain path which might have led down this road. I was single in every sense of the word, hadn't been in any kind of relationship until last year, actually, until I was 23. Until I was around 21 or something, I also didn't really have any close friends and close relationships in general. I was quite the loner. I lived a very sedentary life, and also during this time I would say that I was dealing with something I would describe as a valid reason, if you ever had any, to describe yourself as involuntarily celibate, which is that I had absolutely no time to pursue any kind of romantic relationship in general. And this is the case with a lot of people who I think identify with this term, at least originally. I was spending every weekend working as a cashier, which took the entire day, and I came back home completely pooped, and I would just go to bed. And every weekday I would spend at university, and then I had to come home, study for university, write essays or read something or whatever, and then also prepare myself mentally and relax because I would need to go to work on the weekend, and I had absolutely no time off whatsoever. During that time period, I genuinely felt that as much as I did or didn't want a romantic relationship or a sexual relationship or anything of the sort, there was absolutely no chance I would have the time to experience any of that. However, that is a situation that can change. As difficult as it is to often change that situation, it does. It is a passing thing, and by no means a situation that you have absolutely no control over, which is again something that the incel sort of idea and movement community imply. But of course, the majority of that community talks about appearance and looks and so on, and it is like very verifiably false that as much as being conventionally attractive is going to be a boost in your life, as much as it's going to help you out on dating apps and so on, there is plenty of empirical evidence. If you go out into the streets, if you go on social media, if you do basically anything where and go anywhere where you see people, where you see couples, where you see anyone in a relationship, you will find people who you do not think are very attractive, yet they have seemingly no trouble being in relationships. And so I genuinely believe that the main issue that a lot of these people have is obviously their outlook, their personality, their and quite importantly, the self-deprecation that is sort of baked into the term incel and into relating to that term and to that community. If you go on these community forums, you will find people who are miserable and bitter, and they want you to be miserable and bitter with them. And you will find if anyone ever mentions that, oh, hey, I actually, I've been in part of this community and I actually ended up on a date and everything looks pretty good now, you will see that person vilified and thrown out. Meanwhile, someone who is just, young and impressionable and complaining about, some dating problems, they will pounce on them and then drag them down to their own level. It is not a healthy movement, especially considering that I have seen online people as young as 14 identify with the incel movement and call themselves incels. That is not something you should be thinking about and focusing on when you are as young as that, when you are a child, essentially. To be fair, there's no age limit really to a point where it is or isn't ridiculous anymore. I think when you're 30 or 40, that is no reason to be just miserable and bitter. It is still a time, there's always a time to, improve yourself or self-improvement. All the time you spend wallowing about this problem and complaining about it on the internet, you could instead be spending trying to discover new hobbies or learn new skills or do anything that is even remotely something you enjoy that isn't just wallowing in your misery. The reason I have no problem using incel in this more derogatory form, I think people who identify with the term thoroughly, to the end, they are incels no matter what. Like a wonderful person approaches them and says, hey, do you want to go on a date or something? Instead of considering that as an option, they immediately think it's a trap and immediately self-sabotage to avoid that situation. I think those people, for one, I don't really worry about offending them because, well, everything already kind of offends them. And I also don't think that they are going to be particularly offended because they're just kind of in that state by default. Meanwhile, I think people who are on the verge of joining that community, on the people who are, struggling with these relationships, those are the people that I want to help in this series. And I think it's important to point out that there is something to how you present yourself, there is something to the vibe you carry on your profiles, there's something about how you carry yourself in conversations and so on, and there is a way to come across as a normal, cool, interesting, fine person, and there's a way to instead present yourself in this incel fashion, and I think that is to be avoided. It's very much like a curse, a self-perpetuating thing where, yes, you might be like lonely and sad, but and you know, a virgin, in fact, but that doesn't immediately mean you need to define yourself by those terms. And in fact, it's kind of easy for someone who is in this community for them to identify the Chads and Stacys of the world and deride them for you know, identifying themselves by and boasting about their sexual conquests, yet they don't kind of see the other side of it, where it is at the very least just as sad to define yourself by the lack thereof. And finally, you know, more directed towards the comment on the video here, yes, there is a very, you know, at face value, a meaning for this term, incel, involuntary celibacy, you know, someone who just can't get into a relationship because, you know, they just can't, someone who needs help, someone who needs companionship, someone who needs, you know, wingmanning perhaps, and they do deserve that support. They do deserve to have the chance to, you know, at the very least, not have to think about and deal with this stuff their entire lives. There's a point in sort of, there's not really a better term I can think of, rehabilitating these people into either, you know, being successful in relationships or learning to not be as bothered by these relationship issues, because the third path is, you know, the dark path, so to speak. But I don't think there is any kind of point or meaning to rehabilitating the term itself. It is just sort of permanently tainted, and there's just nothing you can really do about it. I kind of see it similarly to Gamergate. You know, originally, yeah, there was some meaning to it. There was ethics in video games journalism, which, to be fair, was never as important of an issue as people made it out to be in that group, but still their intentions were pretty much fine. But then that movement was hijacked by a lot of horrible, miserable people. There's like zero chance of ever rehabilitating Gamergate as a term, as a movement. It is just permanently tainted by bad people, and incel is very much in the same boat. However attractive it might be to some people who just are completely innocent and really do not deserve to have these associations thrown at them and to be called names and so on, I think the best advice for them is quite simply to avoid those communities and avoid associating with the term, and knowing basically that when people talk about incels, when people talk about those who are this toxic and miserable, that doesn't need to apply to them. No, the term is not something that is thrown at just any virgin ever, unless that person doing it is like a piece of shit, in which case, well, who cares? That person's a piece of shit. That's gonna do it for this video. I would love to hear thoughts on the term and this, you know, topic and this community in general in the comments. And you know, just let me know how you see it, I guess. And like I said, the Tinder series and the associated videos in this one have very little intention besides just the off chance that it might genuinely help someone, because I feel like I've been lucky enough to have people in life to help, in my life to help me get out of all kinds of slumps. I think I would love nothing more than to see, you know, my words possibly helping someone, or someone in the comments being able to help another person as well. These videos do not get that many views. I'm kind of making them for two reasons at this point. One, you know, is this sort of principle, and two, it's just kind of a fun thing for me to look at and talk about. So the next Tinder video also should be coming fairly soon, but I'm always the way I am about saying that kind of thing. Alright, leave a like and a subscribe and a comment, and see you in the next video.
Down to clown.
Hell yeah.
Ever had your ass eaten? Don't lie.
Tyler, that is not how we talk to strangers.
It's like the mother. It's like your mother's.
Tyler!
The second message doesn't matter because it's like a casual question.
Yeah.
Relating to my